Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Skyrim. My name is Camel. More pressingly, however, welcome back to the Elder Scrolls Detective series. It's a series in which we investigate, curate, speculate, hypothesize, theorize, and quite often simply highlight and discuss enthralling, interesting, and hidden things that can be found within the Elder Scrolls games. Today we will find ourselves spending our time primarily in Falkreath, in a seemingly quiet and quaint corner of the hold. Something rather dark has gone overlooked by so many players, although the surface will have been scratched by some. To start our investigation, we'll paddle our way to the sleepy southern shores of Lake Ilinalta, swollen with snow runoff from the surrounding mountains. Here the lake drains into the lowlands of the Falkreath hold, giving the verdurous area ample water supply to flourish as it does. At the headwaters, we'll find a picturesque chocolate box scene. A beautiful little mill, a small wooden bridge, and a cozy cottage, all of which is nestled into the thick boskage of the Falkreath forest. This location is Half Moon Mill. It appears to be quite well sustained, with just about everything one would need to live a quiet and simple life. A nice lumber mill to produce timber, a wooden shed for storage, a stone cottage for shelter and warmth, chickens for meat and eggs, a nearby iron ore vein to provide metal for repairs. They have a lake's worth of fresh, beautiful water, and of course it provides fish too, coupled with a rich forest to provide game and forageable produce. It's the dream setup. Strangely though, next to the bridge in the water there is a stack of cut lumber scattered seemingly randomly in the water, perhaps acting as some kind of dam, but that's no good use of what appears to be otherwise top-notch wood. Especially at a mill, you don't want to be dumping your product into the stream. Maybe the tenants are terrible lumberjacks, although if that were the case, I don't think you would own a mill. A little strange, but okay, whatever. If we do keep poking around, we will start to find oddities. As just behind the cottage where the clearing meets the edge of the forest, we will stumble upon a stump, that of a tree which was presumably felled for logging purposes. Regardless of that, atop the stump is a bottle of gnawed mead, a dead rabbit lying on a bed of blood spatterings, likely the fruits of a snare set by the occupants of the mill. What isn't exactly textbook is the bloodied fork accompanying this rabbit, suggesting that someone sat down with their mead and fresh raw rabbit and just tucked into it, consuming the uncooked flesh of thine local Falkreathian hare. That's odd to put it simply, but it's not too crazy. From here we'll see on the edge of the lake there is a wooden shed or shack type of structure. We should wander over and take a look in there. Well, it isn't quite the selection of old gardening tools that I was expecting. Instead, it appears to be a room for slaughtering, butchering, and hanging animals for their meat. Look, to be fair, all the way out here, this is totally normal. You don't exactly have a local butcher to go to. You have to live off of the land, survive by yourself. So I think it's fair to say there's actually nothing suspicious here. Until we take a look at what type of meats they are eating. They have some nice juicy chunks of venison, lovely rabbit haunches, hanging hare and pheasant, some bloodied rags likely for cleaning the mess. Imagine if they were torn clothes of murder victims. Oh, and look, a human skull, human rib cages, and another human skull amidst jib body parts and shattered humanoid bones. It's definitely not the diet of your average lumberjack. At least I bloody well hope not. It is becoming increasingly clear that something isn't quite right here. Over in the corner of the shed we can also find a troll's skull. This may seem trivial, but to this investigation, this is quite important, as it suggests that whoever lives here was able to kill a troll, therefore keep its skull in their shed. Now, trolls within the context of the general population of Tamriel are very powerful creatures. Lest we forget, at the unmarked cave in the eastern highlands of the Reach, we can find the legendary troll slayer Frofnir Trollsbane, dead, with his equally legendary unique weapon designed specifically for ruining trolls, the warhammer Trollsbane. This guy was so much better at killing trolls than everyone else, he was literally named after it, as was his flaming hammer Trollsbane. Now, importantly, there are two trolls here, They're not even frost trolls, they're not cave trolls, they're just your average old trolls, the weakest of the species. And they were able to take down their greatest threat and heroic nemesis, Frofnir Trollsbane. So, for clarity, the implication that these simple lumberjacks could kill a troll spoon feeds us suspicion that whoever lives here is not your average logger, at the very least possessing enough strength and might to fell not only trees, but also a troll. These trolls just don't kill themselves, you know. Oh, except for that one in Oblivion that actually did kill itself and committed suicide and left a note and everything. Terrible grammar. But you can check out the Oblivion Easter egg video for more info on that one. But back to the here and now. I think it's high time we spoke to the owners of Half Moon Mill. Things will become increasingly clear, but also confusing at the same time. The two owners are suspected siblings and partners, Hurt and Hearn. Let's hear what they have to say. We'll start with Hearn.
Well now, what have we here? A lost little lamb. Lone travelers can find these woods a little treacherous. We've been looking for someone to join us in a hunt.
Geez, that's some teeth you got there. What's that I smell? Sunblock SPF 10,000? Let's finish this and go and talk to the woman, Hurt.
A guest? Oh my. Hearn and I do so adore guests. These guards are such a bore. The patrols never seem to give us time to be alone, the nosy pests. Why don't you stay a while?
No. So tell me, do you like it out here away from everything?
Other people just make things complex. Out here, Hearn and I can get everything we need from the occasional traveler.
Do you get many guests?
We have guests as often as we can, but there aren't a lot of travelers these days. The war keeps people off the roads.
What locations does this mill supply?
We supply Falkreath to the south. Until recently, we supplied Helgen. Falkreath trades with the surrounding holds, and without our wood, they would have trouble keeping their prices low. I'd better get going.
Yes, you took the words right out of my mouth. If it isn't clear, Hurt and Hearn are both vampires, running a lumber mill out in the middle of nowhere in the Falkreath hold. While we do have a whole rabbit hole of theories to delve down with these two, they both possess a striking and ironically unnatural quality for vampires. They don't seem to be affected at all by the sun. And if they are being affected, it really doesn't show or seem to bother them. Now in the Elder Scrolls, vampires don't burst into flames the instant they see sunlight. They do get lowered stats, and in previous games it would actually damage you. But would Hurt and Hearn be walking around like this in the daylight if they were experiencing negative effects of the sun? Well, no. They live out here by themselves. They have no need to abide by the sleep and wake times of a social norm. They are free to do as they will, and they choose to be active and outside unprotected during the day. The beloved vampiric Princess Serana, for example, covers herself in a hood as to protect herself as much as she can from the negative effects of the sunlight. Why? Because she is a vampire. Pretty much every vampire we encounter in Skyrim is hidden, tucked away, buried deep into the dark and forgotten crags of the ancient land, avoiding society and, of course, the pesky sun. Shall we not forget that the Dawnguard expansion revolved entirely around the Blood Prophecy, which aimed to block out the sun permanently, as so vampires may roam freely and rule the land. In short, the sun is a vampire's enemy. So how exactly these two are just wandering around during the day doing their thing is quite the mystery. Or is it? There are 3 known diseases that cause what is commonly known as vampirism within the Elder Scrolls games. We have the more common porphyric hemophilia, the less common sanguinare vampiris, and the third ancient strain noxophilic sanguivoria, which comes directly from the source, Lemay Bealthag, also known as Lemay Baal or the Blood Matron, a Nedic woman who was the first vampire, a forced creation of Molag Bal. We won't go into details for monetization reasons. Now, vampires of the noxophilic sanguivoria disease are not affected at all by the sun. They are only empowered by the light of the moon. Now, as far as I am aware, we haven't seen any vampires who are affected by noxophilic sanguivoria since the Second Era. So, could Hurt and Hearn actually be super ancient vampires, or even descendants of this original disease and vampiric strain of noxophilic sanguivoria? Well, as unlikely as that may seem, they do possess this uncanny and bewildering ability to daywalk. Not only are these specific strain of vampires unaffected by the sun, but as I mentioned, they are empowered by the moon. Perhaps that is where Hurt and Hearn got the name of their abode, Half Moon Mill. It's all very interesting and bloody food for thought, and as titillating and possible as that theory is, there is something else about these two that we must uncover the truth of. Hurt and Hearn, clearly vampires, besides of course this suspicious immunity to sunlight. But I want to ask the question, have they been accepted into society and are left to their own devices because they are out in the middle of nowhere causing no obvious bother? Or are they living out in the middle of nowhere to lessen the chances of being found out? Now generally, like 99.9% of the time within the average populations of Tamriel, vampires are not accepted. Not only that, but they are hunted and killed, they are despised, cursed, as they are seen as a great threat to the people. With that said, there are exceptions. We can find an example right here in Skyrim, at the Blue Palace in Solitude, where the court wizard of Solitude, Sebile Stentor, is in fact a vampire. Not only this, but she has a very powerful position in the capital court of Skyrim. I do have a full video on Sebile Stentor exploring the very possible reality that she may very well be the true ruler of Skyrim, the player behind the chessboard, and I'd highly recommend that video for you. But her purpose in this video is highlighting that although almost unheard of, there are examples and cases of vampires integrating into society within Tamriel. And while in Sebile's case, it's never openly talked about that she is a vampire, most characters within the Blue Palace, aka the characters that spend time with her, have these kind of subtle hint, nudge, type of dialogues that heavily imply that they know she is a vampire. It's definitely not shouted from the rooftops, but it most certainly has not gone unnoticed and is not secret amongst the inner circle of political power and voice within the Blue Palace throne room. But is this the case for Hurt and Hearn? Have they quite simply been accepted into society? I don't think so. Going back to our last example, Sebile Stentor has great value as an aged and wise political mastermind, making the weight of her presence in Solitude Court much greater than the societal weight and threat of her vampirism. Whereas Hurt and Hearn, they cut wood. That's not really that valuable. Of course, it has value and has its place within society, but if you're going to make an exception for vampires to live amongst you, it's probably not going to be for lumberjacks. It's far too risky to knowingly let vampires into Falkreath's population. Now, to concrete this secret hunch of mine that they haven't been accepted into society, well, the answer we seek lies within the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary in Falkreath, where during their questline we'll be sent to Nazir to pick up some side missions.
Well then, your timing couldn't be better. As it turns out, I've got 2 new contracts. One rather easy assignment, and another that should prove quite a challenge. Your first target is an orc bard named Lurbuk. The other is a vampire by the name of Hearn. Happy hunting.
Tell me about Hearn.
He's a vampire and has blended into human society for years. He's never far from his female companion, Hurt, also a vampire. The contract is for the male Hearn, but you'll probably have to contend with the female too. So for Sithis' sake, watch yourself.
Ah, so the truth has been revealed. They are vampires that have blended into human society. They are in hiding. Thanks for the goss, Nazir. Now, the quest itself has no real weight to it, other than someone wanted Hearn dead. Maybe they knew he was a vampire. Maybe he killed one of their loved ones. But another important question we should poke around is how dangerous are they? How much of a threat are they to the people of Falkreath and visiting folk? Well, as we hear from Hurt's own mouth,
Other people just make things complex. Out here, Hearn and I can get everything we need from the occasional traveler.
A statement with a very different meaning now that it's clear that she and Hearn are vampires. So they have been killing people, and it might actually be worse than we thought. At the very least, we saw inside their shed they had a mixture of human bones and 2 human skulls. They have another skull inside their house, but we'll come back to their cottage later on to have a look around. Right now though, we have a minimum confirmed kill count of 3, but I fear that number may be much, much greater than that. It's time we explored the surrounding area of Half Moon Mill to see if we can find anything suspicious, any clues, anything that might suggest nearby vampiric activity. Just to the west of Half Moon Mill, the ground will rise slightly crested with a cairn, adorned by a waggling bolt of cloth, the surrounding ground peppered with native mountain flowers, painting a picture-perfect scene in the deep woods of Falkreath. As we get closer though, we'll spot some more colour, and it's not from the flowers, it's blood. We'll soon realise there is in fact a corpse, slumped and blood spattered at the base of the stony mound. A male dark elf. It looks like he was butchered and spread across the surrounding area by some kind of powerful beast or being, with blood sprayed all over the stone. Now you may also notice that he is particularly pale, as if all of his blood had been drained. After all, he is a dark elf, and a common trait amongst the Dunmer is being more on the dark side. And while we do get some skin color variations within Dunmer cultures and clans and bloodlines, this chap here is looking suspiciously porcelain, again, as if all his blood had been removed from his body. So the body of a guy who looks like he was killed and drained by vampires is lying no more than 100 meters from Half Moon Mill, which is run by Hurt and Hearn, 2 confirmed vampires. If we take a look at the map, we can see that this guy's corpse is right next door, basically in their own garden. So it's more than likely this drained Dunmer is a 4th notch on the fang of the pair of blood-sucking parasites. To continue our exploration, to the southeast of Half Moon Mill there is a location known as Falkreath Watchtower. As we can see on the map, it's just around the corner from where Hurt and Hearn the vampires live at the mill. It sounds normal enough, but as we push through the thicket and approach the entrance to the Stony Sentry, we'll begin to see that there isn't exactly normal decorations dotted around this place. It's all very macabre. Heads on spikes, gory bones rearranged into strange, symbolic totems. If we climb the ruined tower stairs, we'll trace blood all the way to the top, where we can find a dead Khajiit woman. Her life juices spread, soul extracted. This is the doing of a Dunmer necromage who is hiding in the corner. A necromage being a necromancer, one who performs conjuration-based spells on the dead, reanimating corpses and bending the rotten to their will. Now, while she is not a vampire, if we stop and think for a minute, this necromage could very well have a relationship with the nearby vampires Hurt and Hearn. If Hurt and Hearn abduct, abuse, murder, and feed on travelers, but also do not wish to raise suspicions, they need to dispose of the corpses. And what better way to get rid of a corpse than to give it away to someone who needs it, such as a necromancer that lives literally down the road. And out the front of Falkreath Tower, there is also a wooden cart, perfect for transporting corpses up and down the dirt pathways that run through the highlands of Falkreath. Now, while not a confirmation, the proximity and convenience for both parties is supremely suspicious. And to add the third peak to the triangle, there is a third nearby location just to the north of the Falkreath Tower and to the east of Half Moon Mill. It is what seems to be an ancient gravesite. At the center of a flat clearing in the woodland, there is a rather unique tomb comprised of a central cairn and 6 surrounding graves. As you may have spotted, there are also 2 skeletons risen and ready to protect the area. While Hurt and Hearn could use this site to bury bodies, it's more likely that these skeletons are their thralls and protect the area. Although we have seen no evidence that Hurt and Hearn participate in the dark arts of necromancy and ancestral resurrection themselves, these schools of magic are often seen being used by vampires. How many times do we go into a vampire's lair and see risen thralls and skeletons walking around at their command? All the time. Maybe these graves are that of Hurt and Hearn. Maybe they rose from the dead themselves. Maybe they used these skeletons to capture travelers and hunters. Maybe there is no connection at all. Perhaps Hurt and Hearn are connected to the necromage in Falkreath Tower who has been resurrecting these skeletons here. There are many options, none of which have any concrete keystones to set the theories in place, but I would hope that you agree that the combination of the proximity of these locations, how close they are all together, and the common undead themes is a grandiose dose of suspicious food for thought, and sure makes the underlying darkness of Hurt and Hearn the Lumberjacks possibly run much, much deeper and more black than first impressions might have given. And while I understand some of that might sound a little bit out there, it's important to remember that the three closest things to Hurt and Hearn, the vampires, is three things that vampires are definitely known for and would totally be involved in: necromancy, dealing with a necromancer to get rid of bodies, and also a body drained of all its blood. It's pretty damn suspicious. So far, it's giving them a really dodgy rap sheet. Now, another question that I wanted to answer is, are Hurt and Hearn actually lumberjacks? Or is that just a front, a lifestyle disguise, so they are less likely to raise suspicion? My thought is that it's yes to both. I think that they are lumberjacks, but I also think that they do this so that they can slot right into the Falkreath life with as little suspicion as possible. Some people believe that they are in fact not real lumberjacks, and there is some backing for that. Like we saw at the start of the video, they have a whole stack of perfectly good timber lying in the headwaters next to the bridge. Like, why waste all that good wood? It'd be like going to a blacksmith and all their armor for sale sitting in the stream next to them. It makes no sense at all. Almost as if they don't actually know what they're doing. Hurt also says this:
We supply Falkreath to the south. Until recently, we supplied Helgen. Falkreath trades with the surrounding holds, and without our wood, they would have trouble keeping their prices low.
That Half Moon Mill supplies Falkreath and previously Helgen. Now, the funny thing about the city of Falkreath is that it has its own mill. A dedicated on-site mill that creates processed lumber for Falkreath. So why would they need that of Half Moon Mill? I don't think they would. But on the flip side of that, Hurt does say that they provide lumber to Falkreath to help them keep the prices down. So on that side of the coin, it does make sense that they would provide lumber to Falkreath. But she also said that they used to supply Helgen, which is more likely as Helgen doesn't and didn't have its own lumber mill. So they would need to outsource their timber from a nearby mill. And I mean, if we look at the ruins of Helgen, most of it's wood, not a lot of stone structures. So yes, the city of Helgen would have needed a supply of lumber. The strange thing about this though, is that if we look on the map, Half Moon Mill is not the closest lumber mill to Helgen. Riverwood is twice as close. Not only that, but the lumberjack Hod says this:
Wood cutting's my trade. Best log splitter from here to Riften.
Claiming that he's the best in the area, from here all the way to Riften. So why would Helgen get their wood from Half Moon Mill, which is literally double the distance away compared to Riverwood, who has an admittedly self-proclaimed master log splitter? I mean, even sourcing the lumber from the city of Falkreath would be closer. Hell, even getting it from Ivarstead all the way in the Rift is about a similar distance to Half Moon Mill. So that's a little strange in terms of distance and proximity, but with that said, sure, they could have provided Helgen with wood, and I am certain that they are actually lumberjacks, as throughout the entire surrounding area of the forest, there are tons of tree stumps. I've never seen a more scarred forest from felling, the results of Hurt and Hearn cutting down the trees to be processed in the lumber mill. And even if they were faking it and just cutting down trees, where did those 50 or so trees go? Well, I think they are legitimate lumberjacks, so my answer is that they cut the wood and sold it. Also, with the Hearthfire DLC, we are able to buy sawn logs off of Hurt. So going back to my original conclusion, I think that they are active lumberjacks, but I also think that they are lumberjacks so that they fit straight into society and raise as little suspicion as possible, because who's going to suspect two random lumberjacks who walk around in the sunlight to be vampires? Not me. Now, another interesting thought that I want to put out there is, how long have they been here? By the looks of how many trees are missing in the local bosques and groves, I would say a very long time. Which is fine, because they are vampires. Although I would suspect that a lumberjack is a terrible profession for a vampire. Surely you'd want to avoid day-to-day contact with long, sharp pieces of wood. That could potentially stake you through the heart, but each to their own. Maybe they like to live on the edge of society. So now we'll have a look inside their house, which gives birth to probably the most obscure theory in regards to these two. While admittedly there isn't really much of note in here, if we look inside the cauldron next to the hearth, we'll spot some bad news. As we can see, the cauldron has 2 leaks in it. They should get that repaired. Over on the dinner table, there is a third skull that we spoke of earlier. It's no big deal. We've established that they are vampires that hunt people at this point. A victim's skull is no biggie, it's to be expected. But what I did want to address before we go howling mad at the last theory is a particular hanging vegetable: garlic. Now, in real-world mythology, vampires have a weakness to garlic. So naturally, when I walked into a vampire's house and they have hanging garlic, it made me have to do some research into this, as Elder Scrolls lore and real-life mythology doesn't always line up. So, do vampires within the Elder Scrolls universe have a weakness to garlic? Well, I found an answer for us. In the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, in the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary of Shadenhall, the Executioner, a Breton vampire named Vicente Valtieri, he has a note that he's written in his room detailing garlic. Damn that young fool Antoinetta and her experimental recipes, as if the stench of her cooking weren't bad enough. Last week she made a particularly offensive dish consisting of mandrake, onions, and garlic. Garlic. I told her repeatedly of the danger this plant poses to me, but she has obviously not heeded my warnings. It is strange, this reaction I have to garlic. In all my wanderings, in all my research, I have never encountered another vampire thusly affected. It is true that some popular lore holds that all vampires have an inherent weakness to garlic, but this is simply not the case. My situation, as far as I can tell, is unique. If I were to somehow come into contact with garlic, if it in some way came to be on my person, the results could be catastrophic. I would most certainly suffer from a loss of strength and stamina, and fear my resistance to magic would be nearly completely nullified. So please, Ochiva, as mistress of this sanctuary, I beg you to keep Antoinetta on a tighter leash. I love her as a sister, of course, but cannot be held accountable for my actions should she continue to disregard my personal safety. The tenets clearly state that one family member may not kill another, but I don't need to remind you there is no restriction against draining Antoinetta of a few pints of precious life's blood. Signed, Vicente. So, very curiously, but also importantly, vampires within the Elder Scrolls do not have a weakness to garlic, save for, of course, poor old Vicente here. Now, in turn, no. A vampire having garlic hanging in their lair, or house in this case, is nothing special within the Elder Scrolls. I did have to look into it, in case there was another seemingly unique resistance that Hurt and Hearn possessed when compared to other vampires, like their immunity to sunlight. Perhaps they had a unique immunity to garlic. But it turns out they don't, so while it is actually relevant, I thought that you would love that garlic-flavored piece of lore. So, now we turn to the final page of Hurt and Hearn. It is a weird one and probably nonsense, but it's fun nonetheless. So inside their house, you'll notice a distinct lack of reading texts. Not a tome, transcript, manuscript, pamphlet, or stone tablet to be found. Well, actually that's a lie, as if we peek under their bed, we'll find there is actually one book to be found, and a strangely specific one at that, Physicalities of Werewolves, detailing in a rather morbid manner the anatomical study of werewolves performed on live subjects. It also explains physical attributes that the disease/curse will bring to the sufferer. So why would two vampires have such a book? If it was amidst a library of books, it would stir up no suspicion at all. But the fact that it is the only book in the entire house means that it must have a purpose. It's special, like Hurt and Hearn have been researching werewolves for whatever reason. Well, one reason might be that Hurt and Hearn have been having werewolf trouble. At first, it might seem an obscure thought for the sleepy hold of Falkreath, but it sure seems pretty normal today as we're talking about sun-proof vampire lumberjacks. But if we remember, there actually has been werewolf trouble in Falkreath. The farmer Matthias lost his daughter to the visceral butchering claws of a werewolf, whom we can find in human form within the Falkreath jail, a man named Sinding, cursed with lycanthropy, no thanks to the Daedric prince of the hunt, Hircine. Now, the theoretical werewolf trouble that Hurt and Hearn may have faced, leading them to acquire and study such a specific book to further their knowledge on the physicalities and weaknesses and strengths of werewolves, well, this hypothetical encounter may have been from Sinding himself, or another. While we don't encounter another werewolf in Falkreath, the concept is sound. Sinding explains that he came to Falkreath to hunt a great beast, to appease his cursor, Hircine. Allegedly, if Sinding managed to slay this great beast, which we later discover is a great white elk, Hircine would lift his curse, aka his curse of lycanthropy. Now, if such an offer was made to Sinding, surely other werewolves would have had the same offer made to them by Hircine. This would potentially lead more than one werewolf to the hold of Falkreath in search of the great beast, which could very well explain why Hurt and Hearn have this seemingly random yet specifically passionate interest in learning about the physicalities of werewolves. That is the logical explanation of this book tucked under the vampire's couple's bed. There is another extension to this theory though, and it is crazy. So, if either Hurt or Hearn had a run-in with Sinding or another werewolf, and they were bitten or scratched or experienced some kind of trauma, which would normally cause the lycanthropic infection to be passed to the victim, well, I would imagine if that happened to you, you'd want to read up on it. Now, assuming they did have an encounter with the furry kind, would Hurt and or Hearn fear their werewolf encounter left them cursed as a lycanthrope? If they did believe this so, they would be in fear that they will soon become a werewolf, right? Which would lead them to wanting to learn more about werewolves, so that they would know what the hell to look out for and to expect, which would explain exactly why they have this singular and very specific book. Now, while they may or may not have had an encounter with a werewolf, and they may or may not believe themselves to be infected with lycanthropy, all Elder Scrolls lore points towards this being impossible, as they are already vampires, which grants a complete immunity to disease. And there have also been no recorded cases of vampire/lycanthrope crossbreeds, ever in the Elder Scrolls histories. So even if we accept the idea that Hurt and Hearn had an encounter with a werewolf, it's seemingly impossible for them to be subject to the lycanthrope's curse. But if we want to extend on this further and go straight into La La Land, we can accept that Hurt and Hearn contracted lycanthropy while also being vampires. They would be half-breed monstrosities, but they would possess mixed and muddled abilities, disabilities, traits, attributes, and flaws, such as being vampires but also being able to walk in the sunlight, which is an ability they do possess. And if they were half vampire, half werewolf, maybe that's where they got the name of their mill, as Full Moon Mill would just scream of werewolves, but half vampire, half werewolf, Half Moon Mill. It makes sense. You know, a theory is strong when all existing lore denies it, but it kind of matches the name of a lumberyard. Again, ridiculous theory. Or is it? There is one gold coin in the coffer of impossibility. A vampire-werewolf hybrid, a werepire, a vam-wolf. I must show you both sides of this coin though. Firstly, I would like to preface this next piece with the concept of whatever is in the games is canon. This is something that's commonly used by people like myself when making lore-related content. The only information that we can take as confirmed canon lore is whatever is actually within the games. With that said, what you're about to witness was most certainly not intentional from Bethesda Game Studios, but it is in the game. In the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind's Blood Moon expansion, they introduced lycanthropy into the game. Vampirism was already a part of the base game, so now with that expansion, the two existed together. Now if your character is already a vampire, as my character is here, and you have and equip Hircine's ring and choose to activate it, it will fade to black and will get this 12 pixel cinematic showing a werewolf transformation, but once we come back to consciousness, what we now are is technically a vampire and a werewolf at the same time. As you can see, this thing is an absolute monstrosity, with the werewolf's head missing and in its place a faceless, bald vampire head protruding from the neck cavity. Now while werewolves and vampires are terrifying creatures, neither compare to the fear that this thing strikes into the hearts of whomever witnesses it. I'm sure you'll agree I would not want this thing running at me on a moonlit night, or any night, or the day for that matter. Now creating this vampire-werewolf hybrid was possible in a number of ways. All but one method, the method I showed you, was patched out by Bethesda Game Studios. And you know that when Bethesda Game Studios actually patches games after release, they really didn't mean to originally include whatever they ended up fixing and patching out. However, they left this method in, so technically, if they choose to leave it in and it's doable within the game, it's theoretically canon, even though it's obviously totally not canon or intentional. So while there is no lore to support it, I present to you this gift, a vampire-werewolf hybrid. So yes, it is doable, but no, I would not go to court with this as evidence to prove the existence of werewolf-vampire hybrids within the Elder Scrolls universe. Now, to prevent ending on a note filled with such dizzying craziness, I may have found a more sound theory for this book's presence inside Hurt and Hearn's household. In the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall, there is a research manuscript titled Vampires of the Iliac Bay, written by a man who was a vampire but had since been cured, in which he explains in detail the various experiences that he had faced and discovered about vampirism during his time as a vampire. At one point, it is revealed that vampires can actually taste the difference between the blood of creatures, the same way we undiseased mortals can taste the difference between animal meats, or various fruits and vegetables, so too can vampires with the blood of varying creatures. As it states in the book, and I quote, "Orcs have a delicious, rich, brothy blood. Rats are a little too sweet for the only meal of the night. Werewolves are a real treat, almost decadent, the tincture between human and beast, a real gourmet's delight." So yes, that's right, werewolf blood is as good as it gets in regards to taste for vampires within the Elder Scrolls. So it could simply be that Hurt and Hearn wish to learn about the physicalities of werewolves, their strengths, their weaknesses and such, as to catch one and sink their teeth into it for the feast of a lifetime. But whichever theories you accept or deny in regards to Hurt and Hearn, it is undeniable that they have killed at least 3 humanoids, as we discover 3 skulls on their property. So yes, Hurt and Hearn are a danger to the population of Falkreath and its visitors. And while vampires within the Elder Scrolls can eat normal food, nothing will ever satiate their blood hunger other than blood. Some vampires have been recorded to resist the blood hunger, but this ultimately leads to crippling weakness, coma, and death. 3 things that Hurt and Hearn do not seem to be experiencing, aka they have been killing and feeding on local mortals. They are proofed and proven to be deadly. While very interesting, they are overall a danger. So I do hope that you have enjoyed the journey, the discovery, and the story of Half Moon Mill. I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on these theories, or any theories that I've missed. What do you think the true nature of these two is? Could they actually be direct blood descendants of LeMay Baal and the sun-proof disease line of Noxophilic sanguivoria? Are they mild human hunters, or are they working in conjunction with nearby necromages and raising skeletons from the local graveyards? Are they true lumberjacks, or is it all smoke and mirrors? It's all in a day's work when it comes to investigating the Elder Scrolls series and its many strange stories. So I do hope you learnt something new about the beautifully mad universe that these wonderful games take place in, the Elder Scrolls. If you have any information, facts, evidence, speculation, theories, or anything to do with Hurt and Hearn, be sure to comment down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. If you have any ideas for something that should be covered in the Elder Scrolls Detective series, be sure to let me know. I'll look into whatever strange and wonderful topics you present. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a kindness and leave a like. It makes the video look good. Leave a comment with your Elder Scrolls Detective ideas and your thoughts on our tanned vampiric friends. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos similar to this one, please subscribe. It helps me know that people enjoy these kind of videos and it will result in more of them in the long run. Be sure to click the little bell icon next to the subscribe button right here on YouTube so that you are notified when new Elder Scrolls Detective videos are uploaded. My other Elder Scrolls Detective video links can be found down in the description. Down there is also links to all of my social media. Be sure to check all of that out and keep up to date with what I'm doing. If you'd like to support the channel in a more personal way, you can become a patron on Patreon or support the channel right here on YouTube with the join button. As I'm sure you know, all of my time and energy goes into making these videos that I create for you to enjoy, so your support is most genuinely appreciated and welcomed in any and all forms. So thank you very much for watching, thank you for supporting the channel. I've been Camel and I'll see you very shortly in the next video. I'll see you there soon.